The 3 cubs had not eaten in 9 days. Han Jia stood before the observation glass, her tablet forgotten in her hands. Behind the thick transparent wall, 3 small creatures huddled together in the corner of the enclosure. They were Keth cubs, young predators from one of the most feared species in the galaxy. Their bodies were covered in dark scales that should have shined like oil on water. Their 6 legs should have carried them in quick, hunting movements. Their golden eyes should have burned with the fire of their kind. But now their scales were dull, their legs were weak, their eyes stared at nothing. "They will not last another 3 days," said Park Minho, the chief medical officer. He stood beside Jia, his face heavy with worry. "Their bodies are shutting down." Jia pressed her hand against the glass. Inside the enclosure, the smallest cub lifted its head and looked at her. For a moment, their eyes met. Then the cub lowered its head again and pressed closer to its siblings. "Have you tried everything?" Jia asked. "Everything," Minho said. "Fresh meat from 12 different animals, live prey, synthetic nutrition. We even tried feeding them through tubes, but they fought so hard that we had to stop. They would rather die than eat." Jia had worked with many alien species in her 12 years as a xenobiologist. She had cared for creatures that breathed fire and creatures that lived in ice. She had raised animals with no eyes and animals with 20 eyes. But she had never seen anything like this. These cubs were not sick. They were not injured. They simply refused to live. "Tell me about them," she said. "Tell me everything." Minho pulled up the file on his tablet. 3 Keth cubs, approximately 4 years old in human terms. They were traveling on a colony ship with their family pack when a meteor storm hit. The ship was destroyed. A rescue team found these 3 in an escape pod. They were the only survivors. Jia closed her eyes. Their parents? Dead, along with 6 other adult Keth and 11 other cubs. These 3 are alone. The word hung in the air like smoke. Alone. In all the galaxy, these 3 small predators had no one. The Galactic Union has promised to keep them alive until a Keth delegation arrives to take them home. Minho continued. That was the agreement. But if they die before then, he did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Jia knew what would happen. The Keth were warriors. They valued strength and honor above all things, and they loved their children more than life itself. If these cubs died under Galactic Union care, the Keth would see it as murder. They would see it as an act of war. The door behind them opened, and Jia felt the temperature in the room drop. She turned and saw him. A Keth elder, fully grown. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, his body covered in scales so dark they seemed to absorb the light. His 6 legs moved with silent grace. His golden eyes burned with cold fire. This was a predator. This was a killer. Every cell in Jia's body screamed at her to run. She did not run. "I am Vec," the elder said. His voice was deep, like stones grinding together. "I have come ahead of the delegation to see the children." The station commander, a thin Vreen with clicking mandibles, stepped forward nervously. "Elder Vec, we are honored by your presence. Please know that we are doing everything possible to—" "Show me," Vec said. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The commander led him to the observation glass. Vec looked through it at the 3 cubs huddled in the corner. For a long moment, he said nothing. His massive body was completely still. Only his eyes moved, taking in every detail of the small, dying creatures before him. Then Jia saw something she did not expect, a change in Vec's expression. So small that she almost missed it. A softening around his eyes, a slight lowering of his head. Grief. The great predator was grieving. "They belong to my sister's pack," Vec said quietly. "The eldest is Kira. The middle one is Tao. The smallest is Ren." He pressed one massive clawed hand against the glass. "They knew my scent. They played with my tail. They called me uncle. Gia felt her heart break a little. Elder Vec, the commander said, I assure you that our best doctors have examined them. They are physically healthy. We do not understand why they refuse to eat. Vec turned his great head toward the commander. Then you will find out why. You will save them. Or there will be consequences that your small mind cannot imagine. The commander's mandibles clicked rapidly in fear. Of course, Elder Vec. Of course. Vec looked through the glass one more time. Then he turned and walked away, his footsteps silent despite his massive size. After he left, the commander let out a long breath. We are all going to die, he muttered. Those cubs will die, and then the Keth will destroy this station and everyone on it. Gia did not respond. She was still looking through the glass at the three cubs, Kira, Tal, and Ren. 3 children who had lost everything. 3 children who were choosing to die rather than live in a world without their family. She thought about what Minho had said. They had tried fresh meat. They had tried live prey. They had tried every food and every medicine. But had anyone tried simply being with them? Had anyone tried to give them what they had truly lost? I want full access to all research files on Keth behavior, Gia said suddenly. Everything the Union has. Social structures, family dynamics, child-rearing practices. Everything. Minho looked at her with surprise. What are you thinking? Gia watched as the smallest cub, Ren, shifted in his sleep. Even in rest, he pressed his body against his siblings, seeking warmth, seeking contact, seeking the presence of another living being. I am thinking, Gia said slowly, that we have been trying to heal their bodies, but maybe their bodies are not what is broken. She placed her hand on the glass again. Inside, Ren opened one golden eye and looked at her. Maybe, Gia whispered, what is broken is their hearts. Gia did not sleep that night. She sat in her small room with her tablet, reading every file the Galactic Union had on the Keth species. There was much information about their military strength. There were long reports about their hunting abilities, their weapons, their ships, their wars. There were studies of their biology, their scales, their claws, their incredible speed and power. But there was almost nothing about how they lived, how they loved, how they raised their young. Of course, Gia muttered to herself, everyone is so afraid of them that no one bothered to actually understand them. She searched deeper. She found old records from the few scientists brave enough to study Keth society. She found notes from diplomats who had visited their homeworld. She found fragments of translated Keth stories and songs. And slowly, piece by piece, she began to understand. The Keth were not solitary hunters. 10, 20, sometimes 30 individuals, living together, sleeping together, hunting together. They touched constantly, pressing their bodies against each other, wrapping their tails together, grooming each other's scales. A Keth who was alone was a Keth who had been cast out. Exile was their worst punishment, worse than death. Gia found one passage that made her stop reading. It was from a diplomat's report, written almost 200 years ago. The Keth do not simply eat food. Eating is a social act. The pack gathers together, bodies touching, and they feed as one. A Keth who eats alone is saying that they have no family, they have no pack, they are nothing. I watched a Keth prisoner refuse food for 30 days rather than eat in isolation. He chose death over the shame of eating alone. Gia read those words 3 times. 30 days. The prisoner had refused food for 30 days because eating alone meant he was worthless, unloved. She thought of the 3 cubs in the enclosure. Alone. No parents, no pack, no one to press against while they ate. No one to tell them they were wanted. They were not refusing to eat because the food was wrong. They were refusing to eat because eating alone would mean accepting that they had been abandoned. It would mean accepting that no one loved them anymore. Gia stood up so quickly that her tablet fell to the floor. She did not pick it up. She ran through the corridors of the station, her heart pounding, until she reached Minho's quarters. She hit the door panel again and again until he opened it, his eyes heavy with sleep. "Gia, what is happening?" "I know why they will not eat," she said. "I know how to save them." 1 hour later, Gia stood before the station council. The room was full of important beings. The Vreen commander sat at the head of the table, his mandibles clicking nervously. There were representatives from 6 different species, all watching Gia with various expressions of doubt and confusion. And in the corner, silent and still, sat Vec. "Let me understand," the Vreen commander said. "You believe the cubs are dying because they are lonely?" "Not lonely," Gia said. "They believe they have been abandoned. In Keth culture, eating alone is a sign of exile. It means you have no family, no worth. Those cubs are not refusing food. They are refusing to accept that they are unloved. If they eat alone, they are admitting that no one wants them." A Tolek representative made a sound of disbelief. "This is foolish. They are animals. They need nutrition. We should simply force-feed them." "They nearly killed 3 medical staff when we tried that," Minho said. "They would rather die fighting than eat alone." "Then what do you suggest?" the commander asked Gia. Gia took a deep breath. "I want to enter the enclosure. I want to sit with them, be with them, show them that they are not alone. And when they trust me, I will eat with them. I will show them that they are still part of a family." The room was silent. Then the Tolek representative laughed. "You want to enter an enclosure with 3 Keth predators? Do you wish to die?" "They are children," Gia said. "They are predators. Even at that age, they could tear you apart in seconds. Their claws are sharp enough to cut through steel. Their jaws could break your bones like dry sticks." The Tolek shook his head. "And you are human, a prey species. The moment you enter that room, their hunting instincts will take over." Another council member spoke up. "Perhaps we could send a robot, a machine that looks like a Keth." "They would know," Gia said. "They would smell that it is not alive. They would see that it does not breathe, does not have a heartbeat. It would not work. It has to be someone willing to be vulnerable with them." "Then send a Keth," the Vreen commander said. He looked at Vec. "Elder, surely you could." "No." Vec's voice cut through the air like a blade. "I am an adult male who is not part of their direct family pack. If I enter that enclosure before they are stable, my presence could make them feel threatened. They might see me as a rival. It could make things worse." The commander clicked his mandibles in frustration. "Then what can we do?" Gia stepped forward. "I am telling you what we can do. Let me in. Let me try." The council members looked at each other. One by one they shook their heads. "We cannot allow it," the commander said finally. "The risk is too great. If you die, we will have another problem on our hands. The humans will want answers." "There will be cowards," Gia said quietly. The room went silent. "You are all cowards," she continued. 3 children are dying, and you are worried about paperwork, about politics, about saving yourselves." "Enough," the commander snapped. "The answer is no. You will not enter that enclosure. This meeting is over." Gia looked around the room at all the powerful beings who would not help. Then her eyes found Vec. The great predator was watching her with an expression she could not read. She turned and walked out of the room. But as she walked back to her quarters, her hands were shaking. Not with fear, with determination. She would not let those cubs die. The council had said no. The commander had forbidden her, but she had made up her mind. Tonight, when the station was quiet, she would enter that enclosure. The station was quiet at 3 in the morning. Most beings were asleep. The corridors were empty and dark, lit only by soft emergency lights along the floor. Gia walked through the shadows, with her heart beating so loud she was sure someone would hear it. She wore simple clothes, soft fabric that would not make noise when she moved. She carried nothing, no weapons, no tools, nothing that could be seen as a threat. She reached the door to the cub's enclosure and stopped. Her hands were shaking, her mouth was dry. Every part of her brain was screaming that this was a mistake, that she would die, that no prey animal walked willingly into a room full of predators. But then she thought of Ren, the smallest cub, looking at her through the glass with those golden eyes, lost, afraid, waiting for someone to tell him that he mattered. Gia placed her hand on the security panel. She had memorized the emergency override code months ago, never thinking she would use it. Her fingers moved across the panel. The door hissed open. She stepped inside. The enclosure was large, 15 meters across, with soft flooring that mimicked the grass of the Keth homeworld. Artificial moonlight came from panels in the ceiling, casting everything in silver and shadow. The air smelled of earth and animals and something else, something wild. In the far corner, 3 shapes moved. The cubs were awake. Of course they were awake. Predators did not sleep deeply when there was danger nearby. And right now, danger had just walked through their door. Gia stood very still. The largest cub, Kira, rose to her feet. Even at 4 years old, she reached Gia's waist. Her scales rippled as muscles tensed beneath them. Her lips pulled back, showing teeth that were sharp and white. A low sound came from her throat, not quite a growl, but a warning. The middle cub, Tao, moved to flank his sister, his 6 legs spread wide, his body low to the ground, hunting position. The smallest, Ren, stayed behind his siblings, but his golden eyes were fixed on Gia, watching, waiting. Every instinct told Gia to run, to scream, to fight. These were predators looking at prey. She could see it in their eyes, the calculation, the focus, the ancient hunger that lived in every hunter's heart. But running would trigger the chase. Fighting would make her a threat. There was only one choice that might keep her alive. Gia sat down. She lowered herself slowly to the floor, keeping her movements calm and smooth. She crossed her legs beneath her. She placed her hands on her knees where the cubs could see them. And then, she did nothing. She just sat there. The cubs did not attack. They were confused. Prey did not do this. Prey ran. Prey screamed. Prey fought. Prey did not simply sit down and wait. Kira took a step forward, her nose twitching. She was smelling Gia, reading her scent for signs of fear, aggression, sickness. Gia knew that her body was full of fear chemicals right now. The cubs could probably smell her terror like perfume. But she did not move. 1 minute passed, then 5, then 10. Kira circled around Gia slowly, never coming closer than 2 meters. Her golden eyes never left Gia's face. Tal stayed where he was, still in hunting position, but his muscles had relaxed slightly. He was not preparing to attack. He was waiting to see what his sister would decide. Ren had not moved at all. He just watched, with those big, golden eyes. 20 minutes passed. Gia's legs began to hurt. The position was uncomfortable, but she did not shift. She kept her breathing slow and steady. She kept her eyes soft, never staring directly at the cubs, never challenging them. She was not a threat. She was not prey. She was just there. 30 minutes. She sat down about 3 meters away from Gia and continued to watch her. Not hunting anymore, just curious. 45 minutes. Tal finally relaxed out of his hunting position. He walked over to his sister and pressed his body against hers, their scales clicking softly together. Both of them watched Gia. 1 hour. Gia's back ached. Her legs were numb. She had never been so uncomfortable in her life. But she did not move. She thought about the cubs' parents, dead in the cold of space. She thought about the terror they must have felt, alone in an escape pod, waiting for someone to save them. She thought about the 9 days they had spent in this enclosure, believing that no one in the universe cared if they lived or died. She could sit here all night if she had to. 1 hour and 30 minutes. Something changed. Ren moved. The smallest cub crept out from behind his siblings. He moved slowly, his belly low to the ground, his eyes never leaving Gia's face. He was afraid. She could see it in every line of his body. But he was also curious. Something about this strange creature that had entered his space and done nothing was pulling him forward. He came closer, 1 meter away, then half a meter. Gia did not move. She barely breathed. Ren stretched his neck forward and sniffed her knee. His nose was wet and cold against her skin. He sniffed her hand, her arm, her shoulder. He circled around her once, twice, his small body brushing against her back. Then he made a sound. It was soft and high, a chirping noise that came from deep in his throat. Gia had read about this sound in her research. It was the sound Keth cubs made for their mothers. It meant safe. It meant family. It meant I am not alone. Ren lay down against Gia's leg, his small body pressed against her, warm and solid, and alive. He let out a long breath and closed his eyes. Gia felt tears running down her face. She did not wipe them away. Within minutes, Tal came forward. He sniffed Gia carefully, then lay down on her other side, his head resting on her knee. And finally, Kira, cautious, protective Kira, approached. She did not lie down. She sat beside Gia, her body touching Gia's shoulder, and kept watch over her siblings. The 4 of them stayed like that through the long night. When the morning shift arrived and found them, the staff did not know what to say. They stood at the observation glass, staring at the impossible sight before them. A human woman, asleep on the floor, 3 predator cubs curled around her like she was the center of their world. And on the faces of all 4, the first peace any of them had known in a very long time. News traveled fast on a space station. By the time Gia woke up, still sitting on the floor of the enclosure with 3 cubs pressed against her, half the station knew what she had done. The security officers were afraid to open the door. The medical staff was watching through the glass with wide eyes. The commander was shouting at anyone who would listen. And Vec was standing at the observation window, completely still, his golden eyes fixed on Gia. Gia moved carefully, trying not to disturb the cubs, but the moment she shifted, Ren's eyes opened. He looked up at her and made that chirping sound again, the sound that meant safe, the sound that meant family. Her heart broke and healed at the same time. I need to go now, she whispered to the cubs. She did not know if they understood her words, but she hoped they understood her tone. But I will come back, I promise. The cubs watched her with anxious eyes, but they did not try to stop her. Kira even pressed her nose against Gia's hand briefly, a gesture of trust that Gia knew she had not earned yet. She walked to the door. It opened for her. Security officers stood on the other side, their weapons drawn. Gia, one of them said nervously, you are under arrest for breaking station security codes and endangering yourself and others. Gia held out her hands. I know. They put restraints on her wrists and led her through the corridors. Station staff stopped and stared as she passed. She heard whispers. That is the human who went into the predator cage. She is crazy. She should be dead. They brought her to a holding room and left her there. She sat alone for almost an hour. Then the door opened and Vec walked in. He was so large that he barely fit through the doorway. His scales seemed even darker in the small room, and his eyes glowed like molten gold. He did not sit down. He simply stood there, looking at her. Gia's restraints suddenly felt very small against his claws. Why? Vec asked. Just one word. But in that word was everything. The confusion, the anger, the hope, the fear. Gia thought about how to answer. She could talk about her research. She could explain her theory about Keth eating behavior. She could give him science and logic and careful reasoning. But that was not the truth. Not the real truth. Because they were alone, Gia said. Because they were afraid. Because they were dying and I could not watch them die without trying to help. She met his golden eyes. It was not bravery. It was not strategy. It was just what I had to do. Vex stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked her. He lowered his massive head until his eyes were level with hers. When he spoke, his voice was soft. Among my people, there is a word. Kethvara. It means one who stays. It is the highest honor a non-Keth can receive. It is given to those who stand with us when they have every reason to run, who face death to protect those they have no obligation to protect. He paused. This honor has not been given in 400 years. Gia did not know what to say. You are Kethvara, Vex said. From this moment until your death, you carry that title. No Keth in the galaxy will harm you. Any who try will answer to all of us. He reached out with one massive clawed hand and gently removed the restraints from her wrists. They fell to the floor like broken toys. Now, he said, will you help me save my sister's children? They returned to the enclosure together. The commander tried to protest, but one look from Vex silenced him. Gia entered the enclosure again, and this time, the cubs ran to meet her. Ren reached her first, pressing his small body against her legs. Tal circled her, happily, his tail waving. Even Kira came close, bumping her head against Gia's hip in greeting. Hello, Gia said, kneeling down to touch them. I told you I would come back. Vec watched through the glass. His expression was strange, something between wonder and grief. These cubs should have been greeting their mother this way. They should have been pressing against their family pack. Instead, they had chosen a human woman who had known them for one night. But they had chosen, and that was what mattered. Gia looked toward the observation window and nodded. A moment later, the delivery hatch opened, and a tray of fresh meat slid into the enclosure. The cubs looked at it, then looked at Gia. She understood. She sat down on the floor, and the cubs immediately pressed against her. Ren on her lap, Tal against her side, Kira at her shoulder. Then Gia pulled out the simple protein bar she had brought with her, and took a bite. The cubs watched her chew. She smiled at them and took another bite. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Ren leaned forward and sniffed the meat on the tray. He looked back at Gia. She nodded and kept eating. Ren took a small piece of meat in his mouth. He chewed it slowly, carefully, like he had forgotten how. He swallowed. Then he took another piece. Tal joined him, then Kira. The three cubs ate together, their bodies pressed against Gia's, their shoulders touching, their tails intertwined. They were not eating alone. They were eating with family. Outside the glass, Minho was watching the medical monitors. Their vital signs are stabilizing, he said, his voice full of amazement. Their body functions are returning to normal. They are going to live. For a moment, the fierce predator looked almost fragile. Kethvara, he said quietly, one who stays. Gia did not hear him. She was too busy being a mother to 3 children who had needed one. She would stay with them every day after that. She would eat with them, sleep near them, let them climb on her and chase her and learn that not everyone in the universe wanted to hurt them. She would teach them that even after the worst loss imaginable, there could still be love. And slowly, day by day, the 3 cubs who had chosen death began to choose life instead. 3 weeks changed everything. The cubs grew stronger each day. Their scales shined again, dark and beautiful, like deep water under starlight. Their legs carried them in quick, playful movements around the enclosure. Their golden eyes burned with life and curiosity, and something that looked very much like joy. And wherever they went, Gia was with them. She spent every day in the enclosure now. She ate her meals there. She took her naps there, with cubs piled on top of her like warm, scaly blankets. She learned their language, the chirps that meant happiness, the low sounds that meant warning, the soft noises they made when they were sleepy and content. They learned her language too. Gia was the first human word they spoke, though it came out more like Gia in their deep little voices. They called for her when she left the enclosure. They ran to her when she returned. They showed her their favorite spots to nap, and brought her small toys as gifts. They had chosen her, and she had chosen them. But Gia knew this could not last forever. The Keth delegation was coming. Soon, very soon, the cubs would go home to their people. That was the right thing. That was what they needed, to grow up among their own kind, to learn their culture, to become the strong hunters they were born to be. But knowing the right thing did not make it hurt less. The day the Keth fleet arrived, Gia felt it before anyone told her. Ren became restless, his nose in the air, catching scents that humans could not detect. Kira stood at attention, her body tense. Tao paced back and forth, making low sounds of excitement. They know, Minho said, watching through the observation glass. They can sense their people coming. Gia nodded. Her throat was too tight to speak. 12 warships decloaked around the station, each one larger than anything the Galactic Union had ever built. They were weapons of war, capable of destroying worlds, and they had come for 3 small cubs. The station held its breath. Every being on board knew that this was the moment of truth. If the Keth were not satisfied with how the cubs had been treated, this day would end in fire. The delegation arrived at the station 2 hours later. 50 Keth warriors, led by a female elder whose scales were silver with age. They walked through the corridors in perfect silence, their golden eyes taking in everything. Station staff pressed against the walls to let them pass. Vec met them and led them to the observation deck above the cubs' enclosure. Gia was inside with the cubs, as she always was. She had not been told to leave. No one had dared to make her. The Keth delegation looked down through the transparent ceiling. 50 pairs of golden eyes watched as a small human woman played with 3 cubs who should have been dead. Ren was climbing on Gia's back, trying to reach her shoulder. Tao was chasing his own tail in circles, making himself dizzy. Kira was lying beside Gia, her head on Gia's lap, purring with contentment. Gia was laughing. The sound rose up through the glass, bright and warm. The Silver Elder spoke. Her voice was old but strong. "What am I seeing?" she asked. "You are seeing a Kethvara," Vec said, "one who stays." The elder was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Those cubs should be dead. I read the reports. 9 days without food, their bodies failing. And this creature saved them by sitting with them?" "By staying with them," Vec corrected, "by showing them they were not alone, by making herself their family. She is human, a prey species." "Yes." The elder looked down at the enclosure again. Gia had noticed the observers now. She stood up slowly, the cubs pressing against her legs, and looked up at the delegation. She did not bow or look away. She simply met their eyes. "She is not afraid," the elder observed. "No," Vec agreed. "She is not." The elder was quiet for a long time. Then she turned to the delegation and spoke in rapid Keth. Gia could not understand the words, but she understood the tone. This was a discussion, a debate. Some voices sounded angry. Others sounded confused. Many sounded amazed. Finally, the elder turned back to the observation glass. "We will not take the cubs," she announced. The station commander gasped. But they are Keth. They belong with their people. They belong with their Kethvara, the elder said. To remove them from her now would be exile. It would kill them as surely as starvation. We will not do that to our children. The human will bring them to the homeworld when they are older. She will help them learn our ways, and she will always have a place among us. Vec bowed his head. It will be done. Later, when the delegation prepared to leave, the elder came to the enclosure to see Gia face to face. The great silver predator looked down at the small human woman with something like wonder. My people have always believed we were the greatest predators in the galaxy, the elder said. The strongest, the fastest, the most feared. We conquered worlds because nothing could stand against us. Gia said nothing. She simply listened. But we were wrong, the elder continued. Your kind does not hunt with claws or teeth. You do not kill with strength or speed. You hunt with patience, with presence, with a stubbornness that refuses to let the wounded die alone. That is more dangerous than any weapon we have ever made. She turned to leave, then stopped. Take care of them, Kethvara. They are the future of our people. I will, Gia promised. The elder nodded once, then she walked away, and the Keth fleet rose into the stars and vanished. That night, Gia sat in the enclosure with the 3 cubs curled around her. Ren was sleeping on her lap. Tal was snoring against her side. Kira was awake, watching over her family as she always did. Gia looked up through the glass ceiling at the stars. Somewhere out there was a homeworld she would visit one day. A people who had accepted her as one of their own. A future she had never imagined. But for now, she was exactly where she needed to be. She was not alone, and neither were they. And somewhere in the vast, cold universe, the predators had learned something they would never forget. The prey species called humanity had a power greater than any claw or weapon or ship. They had the power to stay. They had the power to love. And that made them the most dangerous and the most wonderful creatures in all the galaxy.